Or to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, I'm going to deliver a statement from Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who was not able to be here this morning. Mr. President, members of the Security Council, we meet at a grave time following the 3 January United States military action in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The broad outlines of the events of Saturday have been widely reported. Early that day, U.S. forces were active across Caracas and in the northern states of Miranda, Aragua, and La Guaira. The extent of casualties resulting from these actions remains undetermined. In a statement on social media on Saturday, President Donald Trump announced the conduct of a, I quote, large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, end quote. During a press conference on Saturday, President Trump stated, and I quote again, "We are going to run the country until such time that we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition," end quote. The government of Venezuela has characterized the United States action as a military aggression carried out in civilian and military areas and as a flagrant violation of the Charter, posing a threat to international and regional peace and security. As we speak, President Maduro is being held in New York, accused by U.S. authorities, along with his wife, Celia Flores, of serious criminal offenses. What is less certain is the immediate future of Venezuela. I am deeply concerned about the possible intensification of the instability in the country, the potential impact on the region, and the precedent it may set for how relations between and among states are conducted. Mr. President, the situation in Venezuela has been a matter of regional and international concern for many years now. Attention on the country only grew following the contested presidential elections in July 2024. The panel of electoral experts I appointed at the Venezuelan government's request to accompany the elections highlighted serious issues. We have consistently called for the full transparency and the complete publication of the results of the elections. As reported to the Council on 23 December, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has cataloged serious violations. On 3 January, Venezuelan interim President Delcy Rodriguez invoked an emergency decree throughout the national territory, extending additional security powers to the government. Mr. President, the latest developments follow a period of heightened tensions beginning in mid-August, as discussed in this Council on 2 previous occasions. I have consistently stressed the imperative of full respect by all for international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, which provides the foundation for the maintenance of international peace and security. I remain deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected with regard to the 3 January military action. The Charter enshrines the prohibition of the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The maintenance of international peace and security depends on the continued commitment of all member states to adhere to all the provisions of the Charter. Mr. President, Venezuela has experienced decades of internal instability and social and economic turmoil. Democracy has been undermined. Millions of its people have fled the country. The situation is critical, but it is still possible to prevent a wider and more destructive conflagration. I call on all Venezuelan actors to engage in an inclusive, democratic dialogue in which all sectors of society can determine their future. This entails the full respect of human rights, the rule of law, and the sovereign will of the Venezuelan people. I also urge Venezuela's neighbors and the international community more broadly to act in a spirit of solidarity and and in adherence to the principles, laws, and rules erected to promote peaceful coexistence. I welcome and am ready to support all efforts aimed at assisting Venezuelans in finding a peaceful way forward. Mr. President, Excellencies, in situations as confused as complex as the one we now face, it is important to stick to principles. Respect for the UN Charter and all other applicable legal frameworks to safeguard peace and security. Respect for the principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of states. The prohibition of the threat or use of force. The power of the law must prevail. International law contains tools to address issues such as illicit traffic in narcotics, disputes about resources, and human rights concerns. This is the route we need to take. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefings. I now give the floor to Mr. Jeffrey Sachs.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, the issue before the Council today is not the character of the government of Venezuela. The issue is whether any member state, by force, coercion, or economic strangulation, has the right to determine Venezuela's political future or to exercise control over its affairs. This question goes directly to Article 2, Section 4 of the United Nations Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The Council must decide whether that prohibition is to be upheld or abandoned. Abandoning it would carry consequences of the gravest kind. Let me offer some background. Since 1947, the United States foreign policy has repeatedly employed force, covert action, and political manipulation to bring about regime change in other countries. This is a matter of carefully documented historical record. In her book, Covert Regime Change, political scientist Lindsay O'Rourke documents 70 attempted U.S. regime change operations between 1947 and 1989 alone. These practices did not end with the Cold War. Since 1989, major United States regime change operations undertaken without authorization by the Security Council have included, among the most consequential, Iraq 2003, Libya 2011, Syria beginning in 2011, Honduras 2009, Ukraine 2014, and Venezuela from 2002 onward. The methods employed are well established and well documented. They include open warfare, covert intelligence operations, instigation of unrest, support for armed groups, manipulation of mass and social media, bribery of military and civilian officials, targeted assassinations, false flag operations, and economic warfare. These measures are illegal under the UN Charter, and they typically result in ongoing violence, lethal conflict, political instability, and deep suffering of the civilian population. The recent U.S. record with respect to Venezuela is also clear. In April 2002, the U.S. knew of and approved an attempted coup against the government. In the 2010s, the United States funded civil society groups actively engaged in anti-government protests. When the government cracked down on the protests, the U.S. followed with a series of sanctions. In 2015, President Barack Obama declared Venezuela to be, and I quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. In 2017, at a dinner with Latin American leaders on the margin of the UN General Assembly, President Trump openly discussed the option of the U.S. invading Venezuela to overthrow the government. During 2017 to 2020, the United States imposed sweeping sanctions on the state oil company PDVSA. Oil production fell by 75% from 2016 to 2020, and the real GDP per capita declined by 62%. The UN General Assembly has repeatedly voted overwhelmingly against such unilateral coercive measures. Under international law, only the Security Council has the authority to impose such measures. On the 23rd of January 2019, the United States unilaterally recognized Mr. Juan Guaido as interim president, and a few days later froze approximately $7 billion of Venezuelan sovereign assets held abroad and gave the designated authority over certain of these assets. These actions form part of a continuous U.S. regime change effort spanning more than 2 decades. In the past year, the United States has carried out bombing operations in 7 countries, none of which were authorized by the UN Security Council, and none of which were undertaken in lawful self-defense under the Charter. The targeted countries include Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and now Venezuela. In the past month, President Trump has issued direct threats against 6 UN member states, including Colombia, Denmark, Iran, Mexico, Nigeria, and of course, Venezuela. Members of the Council are not called upon to judge Nicolas Maduro. They are not called upon to assess whether the recent U.S. attack and ongoing naval quarantine results in freedom or in subjugation. Members of the Council are called upon to defend international law, and specifically the UN Charter. The realist school of international relations, articulated most brilliantly by John Mearsheimer, accurately describes the condition of international anarchy as the tragedy of great power politics. Realism is therefore a description, not a solution for peace. Its own conclusion is that anarchy leads to tragedy. In the aftermath of World War I, the League of Nations was created to end the tragedy through the application of international law. Yet the world's leading nations failed to defend international law in the 1930s, leading to renewed global war. The United Nations emerged from that catastrophe as humanity's second great effort to place international law above international anarchy. In the words of the Charter, the UN was created, quote, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind. Given that we are in the nuclear age, failure cannot be repeated. Humanity would perish. There would be no third chance. To fulfill its responsibilities under the Charter, the Security Council should immediately affirm the following actions. The United States shall immediately cease and desist from all explicit and implicit threats or use of force